Joining us now by phone is Jamil Jaffer. He's the director of the National Security Law and Policy Program at George Mason University and also former chief counsel and senior advisor for the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Jamil, thanks for joining us again. As you look at all of these scenes that have been unfolding for the last few hours, what is the first thing that comes to mind with regard to the Syrian people and how they're feeling at this point?
Well, Marianne, obviously this is a Syrian people that have been plagued by Bashar Assad's regime now for, nearly 3 decades, subjected to horrific abuses, including the use of chemical weapons against them, sarin and chlorine gas, back in, the 2011, 2012, 2013 timeframe. But of course, you have now this rebel group coming to power, and there are questions about that rebel group, right? The question, the U.S. in the past supported the Free Syrian Army. That is not who has taken power at this point, as far as we understand, in Damascus. It's another group that used to have ties back in the day to Al-Qaeda, the Al-Nusra Front specifically. They have discarded those ties, or so they say. And so the question now is, what is the nature of the forces coming to power? Who's backing them? We know Turkey is one of their backers. And what kind of a regime will they bring the Syrian people? Will they bring the freedom the Syrian people have long yearned for? Or will it be just another form of oppression coming into place, replacing the oppression supported by Russia and Iran in the form of the Bashar Assad regime?
And I guess that's the big question. Are the people, all these different people, different factions, are they going to be able to come together to be able to move forward, maybe have a free election to choose who they would like to lead them? Do you see that happening?
Yeah, that's a great question. Obviously they haven't seen free elections in Syria for many, many, many years. And who knows who would win in a free election, right? We've seen in a variety of other countries where forces that are inimical to the rights of the people and maybe even contrary to the interests of the United States and other allies in the region. So free elections may take place. We don't know. The parties have suggested that's what they're looking for. And if we see free elections, that would be a positive thing for the Syrian people. But even then, we'll have to see how the parties contest the elections. Elections are one thing, free and fair elections are another. So we'll have to see how those go.
And I mean, what does it look like as far as the chances of, this turning the other way and turning into, a civil war between all these different groups?
Well, there are a lot of factions. We've got the U.S.-backed Kurds in the north with 2,000 American forces backing them. You've got ISIS still present in parts of Syria. You have, factions of Al-Qaeda that are left off from what became Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the group that's now taken power, as far as we understand, in Damascus. And then you've got that group and their allied forces as well. So there is a possibility that these groups have some interesting warfare. They have not always seen eye to eye, even during the Syrian civil war itself. And then you've got the question of what the other powers who've now lost some authority in Syria, Iran in particular, Russia as well, which has a very important naval port to them in Tartus up in the north and west of the country. And so the question is, what will those two countries do? Will they, obviously Russia is busy with its war in Ukraine. Iran has lost some fighters in Hezbollah with the significant attacks that the Israelis have successfully conducted there in Lebanon. And yet, both of these powers care a lot about what happens in Syria and have spent a lot of time and money and resources to support the Assad regime. It's unlikely they're going to sit by and watch this happen. So the question is, when and how will they respond, and what form will that take?
And can you speak of the timing of this? Maybe there's a new administration coming in, here in the United States, and you just mentioned the countries that had always supported the Assad regime that are now unwilling to or unable to do that anymore. What is if there's any significance to the timing of this happening now?
Well, yeah, I think the timing is interesting. Obviously, you have a lame duck president in office now, one who has faced challenges and has indicated his desire to get out of conflicts. We obviously withdrew from Afghanistan, and that set a certain reputation for the United States, the way in which we withdrew. Now you see President Trump coming to office, indicating very clearly he is not interested in conflicts around the globe, saying he's going to end the Ukraine war on day one, indicating just in a tweet or in a Truth Social post today, making clear he does not want that he does not want the U.S. involved in this war. Same position, by the way, the Biden administration has taken, that we're not going to get involved in this conflict either. Of course, both the incoming president and the current president know that there are 2,000 American troops there in place already in Syria and have been for a while. So we'll see what happens with those troops that are working with our allies, the Kurds. But, look, it'll be interesting to see what happens when President Trump comes off on January 20th, what the situation looks like on the ground in Syria. The one thing the U.S. is going to want to be very careful and sure of is that ISIS and Al-Qaeda or Al-Qaeda do not come to power in Syria or do not have influence. And that's still to be determined, because while the current group may have rejected Al-Qaeda a few years back, they had those ties, and might they turn to Al-Qaeda if Iran and or Russia gets back in the fight, tries to bring Bashar Assad or another leader back into place that's more friendly to their regime? And if they do, will they turn to the hardened fighters that Al-Qaeda and ISIS have? And if they do, then what will the United States, our allies in Israel, do?
Right. And does this have the potential to turn into another Iraq or Afghanistan? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, look, we do see these factions having been present in Iraq. Obviously, ISIS grew out of the Iraq conflict and then spread into Syria. That's what prompted the U.S. to intervene, in part the first time as intervention that we've now continued all the way to the present day with those 2,000 forces. So there is a possibility that this thing goes the wrong direction. And this has happened very quickly. This civil war has been going on now since 2011, almost a decade and a half. And yet these parties had repeatedly fought roughly to a draw, gone back and forth in success. And then all of a sudden you see now this big sprint to Damascus in a very short period. So the real question is as quickly as it happened, could it be reversed? I think that's something that we still remains to be determined.
Also, we have talked at length about where we know that Bashar al-Assad reportedly got on a plane and fled Damascus, but do we have any idea where he may have gone, where he is right now?
We don't know where he has gone or where he is. There were rumors earlier in the evening that his plane had actually been shot down. Those rumors appear to have been just that, rumors and not true. But I think the two most likely places for Bashar Assad to go would be Tehran or Moscow. That's where he has his support. That's where he's always gotten his support, and that's where he probably feels safest and would be protected. And look, we've seen this before. We've seen dictators scramble out of a country, head to a country that supported them, and then only to come back a few weeks, months, years later. And so there is always the possibility that Bashar Assad or another leader propped up by one of these regimes will eventually come to power. But for now, that brutal dictator has left the country, and I think his people have a chance to breathe a sigh of relief, although it may be a brief sigh of relief if, in fact, these fighters don't do the right thing and bring to power other Islamist groups, of the Al Qaeda or ISIS variety.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out in the coming weeks and months. Thank you so much, Jamil Jaffer, for your insight.